before, like I've spoken at the like I said, have you got a copy of the speech? I don't know.
So Charles, the
Thai foreign affairs were very friendly and anxious about us coming and but we met them this afternoon for like an hour and a half. And it was
Good, how are you? Nice to meet you. I'm Rachel.
Everything's fine.
Nice to meet you. Followed you.
I know. Hey, I recognise that silver fan.
Hello. Hi. Hi, Nathan. Nice to meet you.
hey Nathan,
Hello.
how you doing?
Good. Welcome to Bangkok.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
You guys had an exciting week.
Yeah,
Very.
It was very interesting.
Sounds like it's been quite eventful. Been seeing a lot of people and
A lot.
places.
Yep.
A lot. Good.
Yeah, intensive.
Yeah.
We're a bit exhausted actually.
I can imagine. The heat also doesn't help too.
Yeah.
Physically exhausted, but politically energised.
Yeah, okay.
We're ready to talk now.
Yeah.
You know, well, I mean, I'm not trying to seem to wait. What I mean is we've had kind of a week of taking stuff in.
Yeah. And now
And
it's
now
a
we can,
chance to
There were some fairly,
Oh, yeah, I wasn't keeping your face on the table.
some fairly consistent themes. Like very
Yeah.
consistent.
Yeah.
It's quite so important just coming and seeing it. Right? You can read about it all you like, but
Absolutely.
other people know.
Right. Yes.
All right, ready?
Are we good to go? Charles?
Good to go? Yeah. Okay.
2 seconds.
All right, Rachel.
Yes.
Hello, everybody. Can we start? Yes? Thank you very much. My name is Charles Santiago. I'm the co-chair of the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights. This evening, I'm sorry, I'm still in the morning. This evening, we are doing a press conference after the visit by 3 members of parliament from New Zealand to the borders of Thailand. This will be basically a fact-finding. It was a fact-finding mission in the Thailand-Myanmar border, and the 3 MPs will give us a sense of a quick but incisive both analysis as well as key points, also actionable points on the way forward in managing the crisis, not only for Myanmar but also for the larger ASEAN community. As you are familiar, ASEAN is governed in the work with Myanmar on a 5-point consensus. Some would say it's a mitigated failure. Some would say it's a work in progress, and some would say we should give it a try. But let's get your views as well. So let me just quickly introduce our panelists for this afternoon. We have the Honourable Phil Twyford from New Zealand, former minister. Foreign Minister, I believe.
No, but Minister in the Jacinda Ardern government.
Okay. And then we also have on my left Honourable Rachel Boyack, and on my right is the Deputy Speaker of the New Zealand Parliament, Honourable Teanau Tuiono.
Close enough. Teanau Tuiono.
Okay, sorry for butchering. But let me just outline the procedure for this the next 45 to 1 hour. Each one of our members of parliament will make 3 minutes to 4 minutes contribution, point 1, point 2, and point 3. And after the third presentation, I will take over and make their life a bit difficult, just for 10 minutes, and following which we'll open up for discussion. Okay? But we certainly will finish by 1 hour. On that note, let me just welcome Honourable Rachel.
Oh, am I starting?
Oh, you're starting.
Oh, Phil start.
I'll wrap up.
Oh, you wrap up. Okay, just a slight disagreement about who's starting. That's fine. Mingalaba, Sawadika,
Kia ora koutou katoa. It's afternoon/evening, so very warm greetings to all of you. Thank you, Charles, for the introduction, and can I just thank the Foreign Correspondents Club for hosting us here tonight. We really appreciate this. So my name is Rachel Boyack. I'm a Member of Parliament from New Zealand and member of the New Zealand Labour Party, which is a party currently in opposition in New Zealand, and have been a politician in government for 5 years, so since 2020. The situation in Myanmar is personal for me. As the member for Nelson, which is a small city in the top of the South Island, we have a large community of former refugees from Myanmar, many of whom I've known and worked with for over 15 years, predominantly from Chin State, but others who come from Karenni State, Karen State, the Zomi community, ethnic Burmese, and across in our neighbouring region we also have a recent arrival of people from the Rohingya community. And so for me, coming on this visit has been important for me to actually see things on the ground. I visited Myanmar in 2016, so I was there during the previous attempt towards a full democracy, which was then so brutally ripped away from the people of Myanmar. So I'm just going to make some high-level comments on the humanitarian crisis in Myanmar and some of our observations and thoughts about what should happen next. So firstly, we all believe that the focus on Myanmar has been lost within the international community, both within global leadership but also within the media. And that's not a criticism of media, it's just a reality of the geopolitical environment that we're working within at the moment. And that since the coup in 2021, we've had a series of other internationally significant conflicts occur, like the war in Ukraine, like the emerging genocide in Gaza, that mean it is difficult for to compete for that global attention when attention is so small. We've also had the COVID crisis. So within that context, one of the things we want to see is a greater focus on Myanmar. There is a need, from our point of view, for both a lift in humanitarian aid and more focus on getting the aid to where it needs to get to. So we spent a significant time on the Thai-Myanmar border and meeting with leaders from a range of organisations within the NGO sector, within civil society, the NUG, the NUCC, civil disobedience organisations, union employer organisations, media, talking to them about a range of issues. And in terms of the humanitarian needs, we have seen a cut in funding from some international players into those organisations, and we are calling very clearly for the international community to step up and lift their game in terms of how much funding is being provided into the humanitarian need in Myanmar. Also, what was useful for me from that personal point of view was hearing from people on the Indian border side, because there is an obvious difference in approach between the Thai government, the Indian government and China. And actually we commend the Thai government for acting in a practical and pragmatic way in order to support NGOs on the border, to support the provision of healthcare there on the border. But we're not seeing the same approach on the Indian border or with China. In fact, some of the stories we heard from people about what's happening on the Indian and Chinese border are of deep concern to us. The other issue is getting the aid to where it needs to get to. There are a range of ethnic communities operating within Myanmar, different states. We were very impressed hearing from a lot of the community organisations in terms of the setup they have for provision of healthcare, provision of education and social services. But we were hearing discrepancy in funding in terms of once it's gotten through the border, how it then gets further into the country. So we would like to see governments working more closely with organisations on the ground to push funding into the communities where it needs to be. For us as New Zealanders, this is an issue of deep importance to us given where we sit in the region as MPs in the wider Asia Pacific region. But what we want to push on the international community is that we can't just leave this to Thailand alone. It feels a bit like Thailand is being left on its own. And the ASEAN community needs to step up, but more broadly, the international community. And we think we need to see a significant uptick in humanitarian aid being provided into the region. And so those are my broad, high-level comments. I'm keen to get into more detail, and so will the others as we go through tonight. Thank you all again for being here, and I think I'm passing back to Charles or over to Tuiono. Yes, thank you, Charles.
Thanks, Rachel. Over to you tonight.
Kia ora everyone, my name is Teanau Tuiono. I'm one of the assistant speakers. Thank you for the promotion to Deputy Speaker, though Charles. It's great to be here. I'm a member of the Green Party, which is a party focused on, of course, environmental protections, but also social justice issues as well. And we came here with open minds to listen across all the different organisations and Myanmar communities over the last eight or 9 days. I think we've been here for 9 days. And just to note that we've met with, I think, over 30 organisations, probably more because I lost count. And one of the strong messages consistently across all of those groups was to tell us that we need to reject the sham election. And so that's what that's the conclusion that we have come to as well as New Zealand MPs, that New Zealand and the rest of the international community should reject the sham election. And when we were talking to these different groups, they came from all across the country, right, from the west side, south side. They were EROs, they were exiled MPs, people involved in the civil disobedience movement, young people as well. And usually when you go and talk to different groups, there's always somebody that might disagree. There might be some dissent, or there'll be a majority and a minority. But in this case, what we found was that all of the groups were calling the upcoming election out. So some of them were calling it a sham election, some were calling it a scam election. And what we learned was that it will be a sham election because the regime itself doesn't actually control most of the country. My understanding that they control around about 25% of the country, so how can you have a fair election when you only control 25% of the election? We also learned that this election will be phased out through a number of phases, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, whatever. But if you're going to have a general election, and you need to make sure that it is consistent and clear. Democracy requires us to be consistent and clear. And so if you're going to all of a sudden change things in the middle of phases 1 or phases 2, how can you call this a general election? In fact, what people told us was that this isn't a general election, it's going to be a general's election. And they also pointed to the pattern of behaviour of the military junta, of the military regime. So there is not any trust at all that I heard for this upcoming election. This is a pattern behaviour. We've seen it a number of times. So why would it be any different? And so this was a very, very strong message. And there are a whole lot of other issues around how they will control the ballot, being able to control who will actually go on the ballot. And so as parliamentarians, we know when you put your name up to stand for Parliament, everybody should be able to do that. That should not be controlled by a central body. It should not be controlled by in the way that this is. The other thing that we learned as well is that within this upcoming election, that 25% of those seats will be reserved for the military already. So again, they've already got 25%, which means they only need to get another 25% to get a majority of the Parliament. So this, in my mind, there is no way that this can be a fair election. There is no way that this can be an election that is consistent with people that understand that in order for us to have a decent and functioning society, that you actually need to have that needs to be based on the foundation of democracy. And that is something that I felt when we talked to these people, and particularly the young people. You could see it because we were with them, in their eyes, that actually what they wanted was their country back. What they wanted was to be safe. What they wanted was for their families to be safe as well. And we heard that, and we felt that. You know, everybody deserves the right to be free. Everybody has the right to live in a safe place, to be able to grow, to feed their families, to nurture their families as well. But that is not happening in this case. And in order for that to happen, you need to have that strong democratic foundation, and that requires fair elections. This will not be a fair election in our view. It is a sham election. So it's important that the New Zealand government reject this election, and the international community rejects this election. Thank you.
Thanks. Phil, take it away.
Great. Thanks, Charles. Just wanted to say how nice it is to be in such a historic foreign correspondence club as this one, and also, Charles, to be on the panel with you, given your very distinguished track record of being an advocate for human rights in the region. So good to be with you here. On top of the points that Rachel and Teanau have made around the sham election and the humanitarian crisis, I just wanted to, before we open up for discussion, and we're looking forward to your questions and thoughts, share some of our reflections at the conclusion of this 9-day mission to the border area about the particular responsibilities of different parts of the international community. Really, our high-level message, if you like, at the end of this mission is to the region: don't forget Myanmar. Don't forget Myanmar. It's 4.5 years since the coup, and the level of human suffering is greater than ever. Also, the level of political organisation by the People's Movement is actually more impressive than ever after 4.5 years of struggle against this military dictatorship. So our message is that Myanmar is really the worst conflict in Asia, the major source of forced displacement, and we say to the countries who have been outspoken over the last 4.5 years to support democracy, if you care about human rights and democracy, then don't look away. And we fear that there are some countries, including amongst the liberal democracies, who right now are kind of wavering. And they're thinking, you know what, it's 4.5 years, maybe it's time to move on. Maybe we should just go along with this sham election and see what happens. And what we're saying is, no, hold on to your principles and be true to the people of Myanmar. To our own government, to the New Zealand government and its like-minded friends, the Australians, the Europeans, Canada, Japan, the EU. These groups have consistently said the right things over the last few years, and every few months we'll publish a joint statement and so on. But the people of Myanmar need more than that. They need action and commitment. Min Aung Hlaing has a small group of friends: Belarus, Russia, India, China, but they are very firm and loyal friends who give him a lot of stuff and give him support. Well, Myanmar needs the countries who support democracy and human rights to step up. We want to say to the countries of ASEAN that the ASEAN consensus rule has reduced their response to the ongoing atrocities in Myanmar to the lowest common denominator. The ASEAN Special Envoy on Myanmar is a bright spot and is to be applauded. It's a mechanism with potential, and we would like to see more made of it. But overall, ASEAN's response to the crisis has been extremely disappointing. And the doctrine of ASEAN's centrality has meant that ASEAN's friends outside the region, like New Zealand and Australia, constantly defer to a policy of doing very little. And that has really been a handicap. Really, I want to reinforce what Rachel said about Myanmar's neighbouring countries. Bangladesh, India and China, we believe, should take a leaf out of Thailand's book. Thailand's demonstrated an ability over quite a long period of time to be flexible and find creative local solutions to managing a very tough issue on its border. And we think it deserves credit for that, and we think that the international community should acknowledge this as a regional problem and work more closely with Thailand to manage some of these things. There have been some movements of humanitarian aid across the border from India and from China, and we recognise that and give credit for that. But the other bordering countries need to go a lot further. Finally, I wanted to say something about China. I believe that without China's support, the war criminal Min Aung Hlaing would not be in power today. That makes China complicit in his war crimes and his crimes against humanity. And that does not seem to be the behaviour of a respected great power. And I want to say to China, if stability on your border, if protection of your infrastructure corridor and access to natural resources, if these are your foreign policy goals, then we doubt whether your support for this hated regime actually supports your objectives. We say to China that you are propping up probably the world's worst military dictatorship, a home for organised crime and scam centres, a supplier of illegal drugs to the world, and the biggest source of forced displacement in Asia. Surely, a sustainable peace and a return to democracy would be a better fit for your goals in the long term. Charles, back to you.
Thank you very much. Quick questions now. In the first week of October, next week, the Malaysian Foreign Minister, together with foreign officers from Indonesia, Thailand, will be visiting to monitor and to get a sense of what's happening in regards to the elections in Myanmar. As members of Parliament from New Zealand, what would be your advice to them?
I mean, you've got to talk to the people who are actually in control of the place, right? As we said earlier, the regime itself, we've heard numbers, only controls around 25% of the country. And so making sure that you engage with the people that are actually running the communities and running the territories should be part of making sure that people are fully informed, and engaging with the different movements, the democracy movements as well. I would advise on that as well. And also those that are supporting the communities on the border. I think that would be important.
So, can I add to that?
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think there's any possibility for this to be a free and fair election. It just cannot happen for a number of reasons. One, that the military actually doesn't control enough of the country where elections will actually be able to take place. So in many parts of the country, they won't even be able to get in to run actual elections on the ground. There's no mechanism for people to spoil the ballot. They must cast a vote. They're being forced to vote. The number of political parties that wish to be on the ballot cannot be on the ballot. But fundamentally, the biggest issue is that it still follows the 2008 Constitution. And actually what we've heard from people on the ground is that there needs to be a new mechanism for forming a government in place. And so these elections, unless proper principles of a democratic election are put in place, it cannot be anything other than a sham election. But looking forward for Myanmar, there is a real push on the ground over, and recognising this isn't something that happens overnight, pushing towards a new form of what governance and democracy looks like in Myanmar, and that's the only time you have a true representation of the will of the people in terms of governing the country. So while on one hand sending in people to do election monitoring, all of those things to check whether it's running fairly, those are all good things to do, but I don't think you can come away and write a report and say, oh, well, we've got them to tweak these handful of things and it's therefore going to make it a good election. I mean, the last comment I just make is that we've been here before. So, during the previous coup and slow progression back towards democracy, there were elections that took place that were slowly giving more and more power back to the people. And as soon as the final election took place, that was supposed to be the return to democracy, it got taken away. So I'm very, very cynical about there being any potential for this to be a proper election that represents the will of the people and that will lead to stable government.
Phil,
Can I
maybe
say-
just to go back to this, maybe you can develop a bit on the 5-point consensus.
Sure, yeah.
How do we
Engage.
re-look at it? Or
Yeah.
should we just throw it away, or maybe how we should develop new ideas?
Sure. So when I look at the 5-point consensus, I see a pretty good list of things. There's one problem with the 5-point consensus, is that the regime in Naypyidaw have just cynically and consistently disregarded it. They've made a mockery of the 5-point consensus. Really, they've thrown it back in ASEAN's face with impunity. And so there's nothing wrong with the 5-point consensus, but the real challenge, I think, is that we would urge the member states of ASEAN to find a way to engage more robustly with the process. And it may be that, in this case, the consensus rule really is preventing ASEAN from engaging in a kind of a meaningful way. So, but there must be diplomatic solutions and approaches that we can take that would allow a fresh start. The regime has shown that it has no interest, except when powerful geopolitical forces on its border exert pressure. They have no interest in engaging with any kind of inclusive dialogue or anything resembling a peace process. And my message to friends in ASEAN is that there may be a temptation, given how hard this thing has been for the last few years and how little progress there's been, to say, well, maybe this election is kind of a little step along the way. Maybe some good will come of it. But if we look at it really in the cold light of day, it is simply a cynical and political repackaging of the existing powers in Naypyidaw. That's all it is. There's nothing democratic about it. There's nothing legitimate about it. And it is simply designed to try to squeeze a little bit of legitimacy out of the international community and consolidate the power of the war criminal basically running Myanmar today.
And probably just to add on that, one of the things that we heard when this was brought up amongst the wide range of organisations that we met with, that actually it could inflame the region, it could inflame the country, it could lead to further violence, because it isn't going to be an illegitimate election in any definition of the word.
I'm sure in the course of your meetings with a variety of people, you'll have been informed about this bottom-up federalism as a new movement to rebuild the country. And given that there is already, for lack of another way of saying this, the people's movements or the alternative movement are really pushing it. And I think at this time there are about 10 to 15 ethnic states, including NUG, NUCC, have all signed up to the what they call AFTA, AFTA, the bottom-up federalism. Do you think, how should ASEAN say, hey, listen, let's support the bottom-up federalism, as opposed to saying, let's have an election? Where do you think ASEAN should play its politics?
Well, I think we've said it. It's not going to be a fair election, so I think it's important for people to accept that. But I like the federal model, and all of the organisations that we talked about it. They're engaging with the process. Yes, there are different ways that might manifest itself at the state level, at the regional level, but depending on who your bordering country is as well, and that will require differences. But what we experienced with all the different organisations was widespread engagement on the model. And so I think it does merit investigation and indeed support across the international community and ASEAN to actually really look at this model to think, well, actually, this could be the pathway to democracy.
Charles, we met, I think, 7 different ethnic resistance organisations who are all of them fighting on the ground in their respective areas. All of them conveyed a very strong commitment to the to federal democracy and the processes that are underway, including AFTA, which is the articles for the transitional arrangements.
Yes.
So it's a sort of a pre-constitutional process designed to lead towards a kind of provisional government based on the principles of federal democracy. And they are making remarkable progress on it. It was very clear. Interestingly, even some of the ethnic resistance organisations in the kind of north and the west of Myanmar, who are not identified generally with being, close supporters of the NUG and the Spring Revolution and so on, and in very candid conversations, they said to us, "We're fully committed to this. We have to manage the geopolitical relationships on our border with China and the like, but this is where our future lies." So, and the sheer breadth of organisations that we spoke to who were kind of living and breathing this project around federal democracy. One of the other things that was extraordinary, that we spent an afternoon with about 30 civil society organisations, including a group from inside the country, and Anya, around Mandalay, Magway and Sagai. So 3 regions that are in what's always thought of as the kind of Burmese heartland, where the PDFs, People's Defence Forces, have made pretty amazing territory gains, and there is this sort of grassroots revolutionary process now that is driving towards establishing a kind of a federal structure in that part of the country. And it's not driven by, a 70-year-old fight for ethnic nationalism. This is people who have had a guts full of the regime and want something better in their area. And they describe to us the work that's going on, creating new institutions, new grassroots leaders coming up alongside the old ones, and a commitment to being part of this federal democracy. So, if you're a supporter of this vision they have, as I clearly am, this was extremely encouraging to see.
I might just make 3 very quick observations. The first is the role that young people are playing this time. It's been, told to us, and we saw this actually with the many young leaders that we met with, that the young people of Myanmar have had a taste of what a close to democratic system is like, and they've had it taken away and they'd like it back. And so I think we're seeing a real role being played by young people in the leadership of what happens next in Myanmar. The second thing is there appeared to be a common understanding that this isn't going to be a super fast process. Obviously, we don't want it to drag on for decades, but there seems to be a real commitment to proper consultation and proper conversation so that we get this right in terms of what the democratic framework looks like. So rather than rushing it so it can get done, it's let's take the time to do the consultation and have thorough and robust conversations to get everyone on the same page as much as possible. That seemed like a real serious approach from who we talked to. And the third thing is, actually, within many of the leadership groups, we observed a real commitment to strengthened governance capability. And that's actually something we want to take back to our country and other countries internationally. How can they support the development of governance capability? An example was in New Zealand, we have previously had scholarships for young Myanmar leaders to study in New Zealand. And, you know, there are actually opportunities we can look at. How can we support governance capability so that when there is a return to democracy, there is that strengthened governance capability to make it a lasting governance framework that sticks? Because that's what it needs to be. It needs to stick. It needs to last.
Yeah. So, I mean, some of the detail that they had at the state levels with some of their organisations was pretty impressive, to be honest. They kind of spelt out the vision, talked about where they were, how they were going to organise their education services, health services, financial services, as well as a vision in terms of how they organise, the governance stuff that Rachel was talking about. And I think these are the things that we should be supported. These are the things that make a healthy democracy. These are the things that the young people are asking us to support, and that's why I think we should.
Moving to the issue of humanitarianism, there are two elements here that I would like to raise and get your feedback. One is within the country, Myanmar, and the other is across the country in Bangladesh, involving the Rohingyas in Cox's Bazar. It was told to us, ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights had a fact-finding mission maybe 4 weeks ago.
Okay.
And it was told to us that at the end of November this year, there will be no more money for food for the entire population of 1.5 million refugees, Rohingya refugees who are now based in Cox's Bazar. That's one. And number two, if you look at the country, within the country itself, as a result of US aid withdrawing its funds and other US related and European related groups withdrawing their funds, you see lots of clinics have been closed, schools have been closed, support system for the local people have now been completely neutralized. But more importantly, the humanitarian ecosystem, which involves staff, have also been laid off because there's no more money anymore. Maybe get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, so it's the USAID cuts and the deteriorating climate all around the world in terms of the declining support for multilateralism, the shifting of budget out of development and humanitarian assistance and into military spending. These things are catastrophic for the population of displaced people in our region here and further afield. So we have to respond to that. I think there's an element in the Asia Pacific region where the countries of this region have to step up and take responsibility in the way that the Europeans are having to defend themselves and cannot rely on the American security guarantee anymore. If America is going to pull its funding out of humanitarian assistance in the Asia Pacific region, maybe we in the Asia Pacific are going to have to fill that gap. We also concluded from a lot of the discussions we'd had that there is a lot that can be done, for example, with new approaches. So the announcement that Thailand made recently that gave work rights and a pathway to naturalisation for long stay refugees in Thailand gives us a hint of an approach that could be very different. There's potential for countries around the region not to say, okay, we're going to resettle these millions of people in our country, but to say, how can we work with host countries to share the burden of looking after that, bearing in mind that a lot of the people who flee for their safety to a neighbouring country, they don't necessarily want to transplant their lives to the other side of the world because they hope to go home. And we know that if we invest in health and education, particularly education, we can give people many more options to sustain their own livelihoods and to not become a burden to a host country or a resettlement country, but to be a prized asset. And so I think there's lots of opportunities for countries to do things differently, and just reinforce the point we've made already that countries like Thailand should not be left to shoulder the burden on their own. The region and the international community should step up.
Before I get our two friends to respond, the ASEAN Parliamentarians for Human Rights have floated the idea of an ASEAN humanitarian fund. Essentially, this money will be money that's coming from the ASEAN 10 countries, together with partners, Australia, New Zealand, Japan, Korea, the European, Americans, and so on. What do you think about such an effort?
Well, I mean, probably my first question would be around the legitimacy of Myanmar at that. I mean, and whether the engagement will happen. I mean, I support the idea of having a fund to support these issues and to step in where USAID has evaporated. So I think that's a good thing. However, if it's going to have to be through the military junta, well, then we're going to have problems. And so I think that is an obstacle that needs to be worked out.
Well, the plan was not to go through the army,
Okay.
but direct targeted groups.
Oh, you've already thought it through, well done.
I wanted to get your response. And
Yeah, I think Charles, I think it's a really welcome proposal.
So I should wait till-
And for the reasons that have been said. So I think it's great. If you look at, in Myanmar right now, 3.6 million people internally displaced inside the country, most of them not getting access to humanitarian aid because the junta weaponizes aid. It blocks aid getting to the people who it thinks are its opponents. So what we think needs to happen is that the border countries and the people who care about this internationally need to get together and work together to find creative ways to create land routes, to find workable solutions to get aid to the people who need it. And sometimes that involves the kind of cross-border operations that are well established and have been working for a long time in Thailand, and there's a need to increase the resourcing for them. But there are also, I'll give you an example. One of the ethnic resistance organisations we spoke to said, look, in our area, it's simply not feasible to create a land route to get humanitarian assistance and material supplies across land to where we are. But you know what? If we get the money, there is a market, and we can, one way or another, we can buy the things that we need to sustain to give support to the IDPs. So it'll be different in every place, but there's a huge number of people in Myanmar right now just not getting assistance, and that we should not allow that to continue.
Can I just make some comment, I guess, on that western border? Because in terms of the fact that we were visiting the Thai border means the majority of our conversations were around the Thai border, and I'd like personally to do more digging into the issues happening on that western border. I think it's an area, it's harder to get to, so as a Member of Parliament it's more difficult for me to say get into India to visit, to do the same, I'd like to do the same fact-finding mission on the Indian border in Bangladesh side that I've been able to do here. So if anyone can help do that, let me know. But that, with aid kind of cutting itself off at that point, with a significant number of refugees that don't have any status on the western border side, my view is that the humanitarian crisis there is deeper and more urgent in terms of attention, and I would really encourage journalists in the room to actually look for story opportunities on that side of the border to shine a light on what's happening, because it is quite straightforward to get the story from what's happening on the Thai side, but not. It's harder to get information about what's actually happening on the ground on the western border. And it is personal for me because obviously Chin State is the homeland to many of the people that I represent, so it's deeply personal to me. So I'll keep trying to raise the issues on that side. But just young people, crossing across, then being returned back and conscripted into the military, when they're returned back across the border. These are some of the stories we've heard about, and I would love to see more attention on that particular part of the country.
Phil, early in your opening remarks, you talked about the role of China. And clearly China is a hegemon, definitely in our part of the world. Given the last 9 days visiting a variety of people, talking to a variety of people, what would be your message to the hegemons like China, Russia, and India, who are fundamentally involved in keeping this regime alive? And
Well,
both
let
of
me-
you.
Let me make a disclaimer first. We're having a big foreign policy debate in New Zealand about the impact of the rise of China, particularly in the Asia-Pacific region, and what that means for foreign policy generally, and for New Zealand as a small country. I'm not in the camp of the ideological camp that says China's some new evil empire and we must all line up behind the United States to confront it in Asia. No, that's not my politics. But when I look at what's going on in Myanmar, it's clear that China does behave as a regional hegemon. And it divides and rules constantly. It exercises its power, I think, in pursuit of a very narrowly defined sense of its own national interest. And I think it has a short-termist approach. And that's why I said I think that China's own strategy, the way it behaves in Myanmar, is surely not in its long-term interests. It obviously wants to protect its own people, it wants to protect its interests on the border itself. There's a huge pipeline and rail corridor and a deep water port that are immensely important to it. So there's all of these objectives that China has, but it's fostering the maintenance of a murderous and corrupt military dictatorship that is imposing an enormous misery on the people of Myanmar. And I just cannot see that that is a sustainable strategy for it to pursue. And you know, for those of us who see China as already an established great power in the region, and we have to live with China, and we have to encourage China to work with us all, small and middle powers and around the world, I think we have to say to China, this is not the kind of conduct that a respected great power should be engaging in, and we need a better response from it, a better role for China in Myanmar. And my hope is that just through the sheer grit and bravery of the people of Myanmar, the extraordinary progress their armed struggle has made over the last 4.5 years, with no major regional power backing them militarily, the level of political organisation across this highly diverse political system in Myanmar that's a product of their history, they've managed to maintain these things. And if they can keep doing that and chipping away at the illegal regime, then the moment will come when China will see that its long-term interests are supported by the democracy movement and not by the war criminals.
Yeah, and if I could just add to that and just sort of reinforce what Phil is saying as well. It is our roles as parliamentarians to call it out when we see it. And it doesn't matter who does it, whether it's the US or China. I mean, just recently, both of our political parties, the Greens and Labour, were disappointed with New Zealand's failure to recognise Palestine, which we see as causing the New Zealand government to further align itself with Israel and US, which is problematic in our view. And in this case, we see the problems and the issues as highlighted by the EROs and all the different movements that we talked with around the role that China plays. And so I think the point has to be made to China, and if anybody can convince them that actually it is in their national interest to have a stable region. It became very clear to me and to us that instability within the region is coming from what's happening in Myanmar. It is causing instability in the country, and surely, instead of having a narrow focus on what the national interest is, that should be broadened to actually encompass that actually regional stability. That's the best thing that you can have in all of our national interests as well. And I think that's the pressure that needs to be made by all of us, whether we're big states or small states or incredibly opinionated opposition MPs, to make, no matter where we are and no matter what platform that we have.
I mean, China has, the people of China have been impacted by the scam farms that are operating out of Myanmar, and actually that's been the case in New Zealand. We've had many people in New Zealand victims of scams that essentially run out of Myanmar, where people are trafficked into participating in these scam farms, and actually hearing from some of the women's organisations about what happens to women who are trafficked and then trafficked also into sex work through that process. Pretty horrific. I mean, China has, I understand, is not happy about the fact that their people have been scammed out of a significant amount of money in the billions of dollars by these illegal operations happening in Myanmar. It's one example of why the world needs to pay attention to what's happening in Myanmar, and it is in China's national interest for a stable Myanmar, and stability does not come through arming the military. That is not creating stability in the region. So the other comment I'd make is that as New Zealanders, we do have a proud history of independent foreign policy and of standing up to large powers, regardless of where they sit in the geopolitical environment. Something we are very proud of, and it's something as opposition MPs we are concerned about the developments within New Zealand where it feels that we are stepping away from that. But one of the reasons we are here is because that is our history as a nation, and it is important that we call things out as we see them, even with countries that we have large trading relationships with. The trading relationships we have are important, but that doesn't mean that we also can't be honest about what we see, and what we see needs to change within those nations who we work with.
Sorry. Thanks, I saw that. One last question before we open up. Going just by some of the things that you just said, Rachel, is about ASEAN and Russia, Myanmar becoming a source of instability and definitely a source of national security threat for the region, with the flow of arms, with the flow of drugs, as well as the flow of refugees, not only in Southeast Asia but elsewhere as well. Maybe your thoughts on that as well?
Well, yeah, you're right. just to be straight up about it, just to say that the answer to this isn't arming the military junta. We have seen through the last 70 odd years and more that this has not been the answer as well. Actually, we need to be supporting the democracy movement to move to greater democracy and greater freedoms, and to support in particular the young people who have big dreams for themselves and for their country. These are some of the young people that we met. We saw it in their eyes. They deserve a better future. They deserve our support, and that is what we should be doing. And it is about sort of recognising that it isn't just about national security, and it isn't just about national interests, although those things are related. That you need to widen it and actually take a holistic approach. That actually is what is good for the communities in terms of having their ability to be free in their own lands, is actually what's going to help to move the whole country to a better and freer society.
Yeah, New Zealand's a small country down the bottom of the South Pacific, and often our people feel like, oh, we're a long way away from these kind of problems. They're all sort of out there. But one argument we'll be using when we go home with people is that, the methamphetamine epidemic is a major social problem in New Zealand, massive social problem. You know where all that meth comes from? Myanmar. So that's one argument we'll be using that'll hopefully open people's eyes to the crisis.
Okay, guys, now it's your turn. You're done here. There's a mic, I think, somewhere at the back.
Oh, is this how this happens?
Oh, yeah, that's right. I can see.
Hi, Tommy Walker.
Just please introduce yourself and then...
Okay. Tommy Walker, journalist here in Bangkok. I'm also on the board here at the club. Nice to meet you. Welcome to the FCCT. you've talked about many different ways in supporting, or from your trip. But what will be the focus? Will it, when you go back to New Zealand, what will you be campaigning for? Will it be to, provide humanitarian aid? Will it be to establish direct connections with the opposition, many of the groups that you met? Will it be any form of lifeboat schemes? We've seen that in Hong Kong in recent years with the UK, where when many Hong Kongers wanted to leave, they were given these BNO passports to start a new life in the UK. I know you mentioned some people don't want to leave the area, but some potentially will. Is there potential you might fast-track applications? So what's the main focus that you're going to go back with? And secondly, what is the sentiment in New Zealand about Myanmar? Is there an awareness about what's happening with all the problems it has, whether it's the civil war, the amphetamine, the drug issues? I mean, what's the sentiment there?
Well, our first key message is going to be to call on the New Zealand government to reject the sham election. We have spent quite a bit of time explaining why, but we're going to be quite upfront with that with the New Zealand government. I feel that is the expectation of all the groups that we've met, so that's one thing that we will carry from here to there. And then there are a whole lot of other things that we want to call for as well. For example, humanitarian aid that perhaps Rachel wants to talk about.
So yes, so the two key messages we'll be taking home immediately are to reject the sham election, and we would like the New Zealand government to do that, and to work alongside our partners as well to encourage the international community to do the same. The second is around working with partners, but also taking a good look at New Zealand's humanitarian aid, so that humanitarian aid. The third thing is also working with other like-minded MPs globally to lift up the issues that are facing Myanmar. I'm keen to answer your second question because it's a good question. Do New Zealanders care about Myanmar? New Zealanders on the whole, for the most part, are proudly supportive of international issues and international movements, and have a proud history of welcoming former refugees and migrants into New Zealand. But having said that, like all countries around the world, when you face matters like COVID, economic crises, cost of living crises, it can be easy for people to take the focus off what is happening internationally. Our Myanmar diaspora are mostly based in Auckland, our largest city, Wellington, our capital city, and my very small city of Nelson. So what I can say is when the New Zealand government made a terrible decision last year to allow 2 representatives of the junta into New Zealand for an ASEAN conference, my community of Myanmar refugees walked up the main city street in the hundreds, and the people of Nelson came out of their shops, stood on the side of the street and applauded them. I was incredibly proud to be a Nelsonian that day. But what I would say is outside of those 3 centres, the issue probably isn't that well known. And, for us in Nelson, we're exceptionally proud of the Myanmar community because they play such an important role in our daily lives. They are members of our school communities, the kids play soccer together. They are embedded within the Nelson community. But I also think the comments that have been made around things like issues with methamphetamine, most New Zealanders would not know that the methamphetamine, which is a scourge on our community and causes deep social issues, is actually being produced in Myanmar. And it's a good example of why, when we are at the bottom of the ocean, and some people in New Zealand would say, why are we worried about what's going on in the other side of the world? Well, there's 2 reasons for that. First of all, we should be worrying about matters of humanity. That is what human beings should do fundamentally. And secondly, actually what happens on the other side of the world does affect us in New Zealand.
Phil?
No, that's right. Yeah.
No, okay.
Probably just to further answer the question, we are going to have public engagement meetings, so we will be visiting Rachel's community in Nelson, Auckland and Porirua, so connecting with the diaspora communities, and we're going to also have an event in the Parliament to sort of discuss with our parliamentary colleagues about what we've heard and to find a way as a parliament to address the issues of Myanmar.
Thanks.
Actually, I also add that we had a great meeting at the Thai Parliament this morning with several MPs from the People's Party, and the discussion was great, and we committed to working together internationally, first in sort of ASEAN and Asia Pacific region, organising a network of parliamentarians to do this kind of, take this political work forward.
Thank you. Keith Richburg. I write editorials for the Washington Post. A couple of quick questions. I'll make them quick because we have somebody else waiting. I'm talking about the U.S. very specifically now. The Secretary of State Rubio has said they're no longer going to comment on democratic elections in other countries. And we've seen that they have lifted some sanctions on some people affiliated with the regime there. Trump wants to meet with Xi Jinping. So I guess one question is, are you kind of worried that this is leading towards a U.S. recognition of the government there? Trump and Menonghang have exchanged letters, for example. And second part of that, I mean, the U.S. still has sanctions on jet fuel. They have sanctions on the oil company. They have sanctions on the state bank. What else could they be doing if you want to put more pressure on this regime? Is there anything left to be doing? And then finally, one question for Charles before I sit down. I'm just wondering, you know, you're about to admit East Timor into ASEAN. Will that give another voice to human rights and democracy within the grouping that might change the discussion? Thank you.
Maybe he's writing about something about technical. I think Trump's own colleagues are worried about what Trump's going to say next, I think, just to answer your issue there. But just to sort of point with the evaporation of US aid everywhere, including in the Pacific, and I know because we're from the Pacific, it's been keenly felt. And so I think there is a point where states say, well, actually, the US is becoming incredibly unreliable. Well, they are becoming unreliable because of their leadership. That we need to find other ways to actually fill the political vacuum, and that could require bilaterals, where we try to have state-to-state discussions that go around the issue of the states as well. But then there's that big, massive financial vacuum as well that needs to be taken up in order to actually get the humanitarian aid that needs to get into Myanmar as well. That is a big financial question that needs to be answered.
I mean, it's extremely disappointing to see the reduction in aid from the likes of the US. But I agree with my colleague that if the US is becoming unreliable, then we do need to look to other places for that humanitarian aid to come from. I'd also say that the US should take a good look at how much the scam farms are impacting on their people. I'm not sure of that detail, but it's a question I'd ask. Because it's another example of why what happens in other parts of the world can impact on your own community.
Just on the issue of the US, there is something called the Burma Act that the US has put forward. But in the last couple of months, since Trump has taken over, you don't find much discussion on the Burma Act. I think maybe it's time to revisit some of the issues there. And also get much more further commitment on the part of the US in pushing for changes in this part of the world. I absolutely agree with you that the US might want to talk to China on Myanmar, partly because of the huge resources available in Myanmar, which is something that they have already said that they are interested in. So I think this is something that we have to keep in mind and also keep monitoring the developments. On East Timor, East Timor will be admitted as the 11th ASEAN member in October at the big meeting that's taking place in the 3rd or 4th week of October. Definitely it'll be a big voice of reason, voice of justice, and a voice for democracy in the region. And I think they have been very solidly behind the resistance groups in Myanmar. They've come out openly a number of times supporting the resistance groups to the point that Myanmar actually recalled his ambassador from East Timor because they couldn't take it anymore. They said, yeah, enough of your relationship with you, and they recalled the ambassador from East Timor. But I think it'll be interesting to see how this thing goes though. But I think when it comes to ASEAN, the countries that will really make a big difference would be Thailand, Indonesia, Singapore, and Malaysia.
Yeah.
I think these 4 countries should really push hard because you will have other countries like Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand itself they might have a different game plan for Myanmar. No?
Yeah, it'll probably make it easier for Australia and New Zealand to hitch a wagon to a wagon that's going in the right direction as well, just to sort of be...
Well, Australia and New Zealand might say, since the ASEAN guys are all divided, we can't make a decision.
Yeah.
But Sir, go ahead. Oh, sorry, you were going to say?
Well, I was just going to say, both for New Zealand and Australia, the ASEAN relationship is critically important. It's highly valued. And I think the challenge for our governments, really, and our diplomats, is to think, how can we work and find a way to contribute positively alongside ASEAN partners to try to find those opportunities to do something better on Myanmar, to support a sustainable peace. And I'm honestly not sure that they've made the effort that they could have. And one of our messages is, from this mission is to really try to put a rocket under our governments and say,
Make the effort.
do more. This is one of the most important conflicts in our region for all the reasons we've said. You need to lift your game and work with our friends in ASEAN and find ways to make progress to support democracy.
Sir, your question.
My name is Kalinga Senigaran. I'm from Shinawat University, research fellow, and also I'm a journalist. I write for South China Morning Post and a few other things. Now, I have been traveling in this region. Actually, I have been to Myanmar 5 times before the military regime came. I have done journalism training there and also given lectures at Yangon University. And those people I have been working with, they're still in Myanmar. And now, there was a number of times you're talking about China as a hegemon. Come on, what about the US? Our worry in Asia is the US is a real hegemon who is trying to create conflict in the region everywhere. And that, of course, will help Trump to pay off his debts to the arms industry. Okay, so that's a real issue here. And I have been an Australian citizen for 40 years. And Australia is the hegemon in the South Pacific. Papua New Guinea just refused to sign a defense agreement with Australia. So now, as a Sri Lankan, I would agree with your view that India is also hegemon for the South Asian region.
Yeah.
So hegemony is something very subjective. Now, what I gathered from what you were talking, you haven't been inside Myanmar to talk to anyone. I suppose it's not easy to get in there to talk to people inside Myanmar, especially in Yangon or Naypyidaw, where you may have got a different idea. And now, my question, I have asked this question from many people who are outside in these NGO sectors. Now, who is arming the rebels in Myanmar? It's not the Indians, it's not the Chinese, because they want stability in Myanmar. China is very frustrated. Their BRI railways cannot create the pan-Asian connectivity because Myanmar is very crucial. And India is very frustrated. Their road project connecting India's Look East policy, connecting India to Southeast Asia, is being sabotaged by this conflict in Myanmar. Now, one is Manipur. Those arms going into Myanmar has filtered into Manipur, and there's a civil war in Manipur as a result of it. And that's where the start of the road is, and then going to Rakhine State. So both those countries would be very keen for these so-called sham elections to succeed. So it will bring some stability into the region. And this Trump's aid cuts, there could be a silver lining to it. Those so-called young people and all these people who have been affected by these aid cuts, they may be forced to compromise with whatever the regime which comes through are elected, and look for ways of stabilizing the country. Now, I can remember when Aung San Suu Kyi was head of state, she gave the Singapore lecture, I think it was 2017, I was there. There were about 500 people, a lot of them were Singapore business people. And she made argument, very strong argument, that the problem in Myanmar is a development problem, socio-economic problem, not an ethnic problem, not a religious problem. And that she was trying to, she was inviting Singapore businesses to come and invest in Myanmar, especially in the rural areas, so that the people, the rural people, could be socio-economically empowered. And she said that is the way to solve the problem in Myanmar. And I still believe that's the problem. That's the way to solve the problem, where New Zealand and Australia could also help, and not encourage young people to riot and create chaos, because we see all over the world that hasn't worked. And this democracy, the West or Anglo-Saxons are talking about, it's not working. Maybe New Zealand is one of the very few examples where democracy still works. But we have to look for a new beginning. And I think next week there's going to be at the UN General Assembly a resolution which may come up, and it will be voted probably by 145 countries or so on a new definition of human rights, which was initiated by China, but it's supported by India and many other countries as a development right, not an individual right. So things are changing, and we need to look at some new. Yeah. So we need to look at some new ways of looking at it. So
are you proposing that more investments, bringing about jobs, should be encouraged? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, did you think about it or talk to people in the region, even ASEAN, because ASEAN would also be involved in more investment going into the country to empower the people is empowering socio-economically.
Sure.
So how can New Zealand, Australia, along with ASEAN, I'm sure that is what ASEAN will be doing after the elections. How can New Zealand also join in that?
So it's more of a comment.
Sure. I have keen to respond. So I have a non-discrimination policy on hegemons. I like to treat all my hegemons equally, and my view generally is that hegemons will behave like hegemons, and I include the United States in that category as well as China and others. And it's up to people, and particularly small and middle powers, to try to create institutions that constrain the bad behaviour of hegemons. I'm not a defender of the US. I'm not a believer that I don't particularly want to encourage our countries to support the US in some kind of fight for supremacy with China in Asia. I think that's a disastrous pathway. But there's no question in my mind that China has abused and continues to abuse its power. It's the extreme power differential between it and Myanmar. The idea that the sham elections would bring stability. Have you seen the number of airstrikes that have happened in Myanmar in recent weeks and months? The regime is ratcheting up its war against its own people in the lead up to the sham election. There's every prospect that the sham election is going to create more instability and bloodshed, not less. And with all due respect to Aung San Suu Kyi, the idea that the current situation in Myanmar, where a government bombs hospitals, schools and IDP camps on a daily basis, it routinely tortures political prisoners and slaughters its own civilian population in such a wanton manner. The idea that this is a development problem that can be solved through investment is, I think, I'm sorry, but a nonsense. If you look at the history of Myanmar over 70 years, the military class in Myanmar has bled that country dry. They treat it like a personal ATM machine for the personal enrichment of a small group, a caste of military officers. They have subjected their own people to the most brutal forced labour that you can imagine for decades. This is not a regime that we should be giving any aid or support to. And our worry is that these sham elections will simply be used to provide a fig leaf of legitimacy. And we should not be doing that.
Thanks, Phil.
Here, Phil.
Yes.
I just say yes to what Phil just said.
There's a question.
Good evening. I'm Tony Davis. I write for the Jane's Defence and Security publications. Thank you very much for all your comments. It's good to see you here. we don't get many parliamentarians from your part of the world, and I include Australia in that group. I have a question which is based on an assessment, so if you'll bear with me very briefly, I'll give you the assessment, which you may actually disagree with, but I think it's one that I'm fairly confident in. The assessment is that whatever we may think about it, whatever it's going to look like, however flawed it's going to be, there will be in the coming, starting on December 28th and probably going into January, maybe even February, there will be an electoral process. It's going to happen. As a result of that process, there will be a group of men, probably no women, a group of men wearing long Gs, not army uniforms, who will be appointed to be the civilian government of Myanmar. Pretty much as soon as that happens, India and China are going to recognize that government, namely the two biggest countries in Asia. My belief is that within pretty short order, ASEAN will also recognize that government. And there's been mention of Timor-Leste. It's good that Timor-Leste will be part of ASEAN, but my assessment is that given the alternative of a major split down the center of ASEAN between what we might call authoritarian mainland states and perhaps more liberal maritime states, the group will actually stand together. My question is this: in a situation like that, will your country, and I come from Australia, will Australia, and by extension other liberal democracies in the region, Japan, South Korea, will those countries allow ASEAN's recognition of this regime to become a running sore in relations going forward? Or, alternatively, will we see a decent interval of perhaps a few years, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and then at the end of the day, everybody gets on the same bandwagon? That's the question. Thank you.
Yeah, if I could just quickly just acknowledge what you're saying there. I mean, at the end of the day, we can't be responsible for other people's actions. We can call on ASEAN to not recognise this election, to call it a sham election, and that is what has been asked of us right across all of the different organisations that we have met, and our intention is to actually put pressure on our government to also to call out the sham election as well. That is the part that we can play. And it's also about trying to reach out to other parliamentarians and to other governments as well to play the part that they can play. Because what these other countries will do or won't do, that will at the end of the day will be entirely up to them. But that doesn't mean that we have to actually follow suit. So I think it's really important that we follow through with what we've heard across the wide range of organisations, groups, EROs, the ENUG, etc., to respect what they want. It's appropriate decision making.
Can I add just, I agree with your assessment. Elections will take place. I don't think there's anything that can be done to stop that from happening. So I agree with your assessment. You're probably correct that China and India will then recognise the results of those elections. I'm not entirely convinced around the full suite of ASEAN countries. One of the challenges as a country in the Pacific that's connected into the Asia-Pacific region is, as Phil mentioned early on tonight, that we've seen, that what would be considered a muted response from ASEAN countries because there is disagreement within them. So I'm not completely convinced with your assessment around ASEAN as a whole. But I think Teanau is right that even if your assessment proved to be correct, and we did see a situation where ASEAN nations collectively acknowledged the election and recognised the government, and I say with inverted commas, that does not mean New Zealand has to follow suit. And we are politicians from parties that fiercely value that independent foreign policy we have. We have seen a blip in the last couple of days that we're, frankly, as opposition politicians, embarrassed of. But we will be, regardless of what ASEAN countries choose to do, either individually or collectively, we will be pushing our government. Now, there will also be a push within the Australian government as well. We know that there are a significant number of Australian MPs from across their parliament deeply connected to the Myanmar situation and in support of the people of Myanmar and in opposition to the junta. And so that will be part of our conversations in the coming days, as working with our Australian political counterparts. So I agree with some of your assessment, bit of a difference on another. And then I would say, as New Zealand opposition MPs, we will be very, very loud about what we believe our government should do in response.
Tony, let me have a crack as well, because it's a great question. We wouldn't be here if we didn't believe that your scenario was a real threat. That's why we're here, to push back on our government and its like-minded friends. But I think the bigger and more important point here is that the contest for legitimacy internationally is only one part of the bigger equation around the future of Myanmar. And actually it's by far not the most important one. So if you look at the history, the kind of modern post-colonial history of Myanmar, there has never been a revolutionary movement like this one that has the genuine prospect of uniting groups right across the population and right across the country, and is making remarkable progress, as I talked about before, in terms of a constitutional process in the direction of federal democracy. Nor, in spite of 7 decades of civil war in different parts of the country, there has never been the level of military collaboration that has led to 3/4 of the country of the land area being outside of the control of the military and the capital city. That's never happened before. And one of the things that I sort of took away from the last 9 days on the border is that the groups and the institutions of the revolution, they know that victory's not going to come next week, and they're digging in for the long haul. This is not something they're doing lightly. It's not something they're going to get disenchanted and give up in 2 weeks' time. No, they're settling in for the long haul. And so those things, the armed struggle on the ground, the facts on the ground, and the politics across the country are far more important than this contest for international recognition or legitimacy. So.
Can I just make one further comment? Because you asked about whether this would be a festering sore, and as we've noted, the relationship between the ASEAN countries and New Zealand is extremely important, both from a geographical connection and also from a trading point of view. And so if there were a situation where ASEAN as a group recognised the results of the election, would that cause a challenge for the relationship? Well, I can't sit here and say no. It would cause some challenges. Would that be fatal to the relationship? No. One of the things that I believe New Zealand is very good at is maintaining diplomatic relations with other nations when we do have disagreements. And that is important. It is important in how democracy and diplomacy operates globally, that actually you can have like-minded countries, you can be friends with other countries and still disagree. So would it be challenging? Yes. Would it be an end to relationships? Absolutely not. And the importance of those ASEAN relationships are critical to us, both from, as I said, the fact that we are close geographically and personally connected into this region, and from a trading point of view.
Thank you very much for those
If
thoughts.
I can respond,
Could I follow on, because I have a question for you, so if I may ask specifically, as the representative of ASEAN here, do you agree with my assessment that ASEAN as a bloc will recognise this, the result of this abortion of an election? Or do you think it's possible that we could see a major rift emerging down the middle of this body which prides itself on centrality and a wonderful future?
They say great minds think alike. I was just going to respond to that issue that you raised. I think Myanmar is not the only entity on trial here. ASEAN too is on trial here. The future, the stakes for ASEAN is also quite high up there. So ASEAN's future as a regional body in trying to solve regional issues is at stake as well.
Yeah.
So there are two stakes here. But if you go back 2 years down the road, when Indonesia was the chair, the Indonesian government reported at the end of their 10 months as the chair of ASEAN, they had conducted something like 164 different engagements and dialogues to realize the first principle of the ASEAN five-point consensus, which was political dialogue. Now, nothing much happened after the following year, but this year, Malaysia too met up with everybody, including the army, the military, and the various ethnic groups and NGOs and so on and so forth. There were a number of meetings that took place in Bangkok, in Myanmar, as well as in Malaysia. The point that I would like to raise is, just like in Indonesia, where finally President Jokowi said they are so far apart that it is simply impossible to draw one line to bring them together, even on one issue. Now, that was the same question I posed to the Malaysian government when they had all of these dialogues. What is it you're going to do that's going to be different from what Indonesia has done? Why are you not take a different strategy, though? But the point I want to raise is this: nothing has changed. In fact, things on the ground has become worse. Yep. It has deteriorated. The animosity has become wider. The fighting has become much more brutal on both sides. So therefore, even if you have an election, and even if that's not even, he's definitely going to win the elections, but 3/4 of the country is not going to accept it. And the war is going to be extended for another 10 more years. So nothing in principle, nothing structurally will change. China can say, yes, now we have a legitimate government. That will be challenged. And it will be challenged not only in ASEAN, but elsewhere as well. And I think while ASEAN always has got this, this approach that bring together everybody, we make a common decision and those kinds of stuff. But I think this is going to break ASEAN's back because then it's going to be very clear you could not solve the problem, a huge problem in your own region. Your legitimacy to exist is now challenged. I think this is what is at stake for ASEAN. So Myanmar is not on trial alone. ASEAN too is on trial.
Break ASEAN's back because of split on recognition or because of failure to implement
I think there is an acknowledgement already that the 5-point consensus is already failed. Except that ASEAN has got a very bizarre way of working that it doesn't want to keep changing though. They will try to see how to improvise and so on and so forth. But in all the 5 points that have been put forward, nothing has changed from the time it was put forward 4.5 years ago. Nothing has changed.
So there's 5 points but no consensus, is that what you're saying?
Yeah. There are two divisions in the region. One, you have Philippines, Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore on one side. You have Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, and Brunei on the. Brunei can go both sides, but they're split. They're very split. But there's a split on Myanmar is a fundamental split of old relationships, of businessmen, of military ties. So this is going to be interesting for ASEAN. And I think when I hear some of the diplomats saying that this is going to be very bad for ASEAN. And because you pride ASEAN as a compassionate region, you pride ASEAN as loving and caring, but hey, you have 1.5 million refugees sitting in Cox's Bazar. Nobody cares, but it's ASEAN's problem. Nobody cares about them. You have another 3.5 billion people who have been displaced, along the borders of Thailand and Myanmar. Nothing has happened. So therefore, as a regional body, as a regional leader, you have not done anything fundamental to change the lives of those people in those places, as well as to bring any resolution. So it's not ASEAN, not Myanmar is not on trial. I mean, it's on trial, yes, but it's ASEAN too is on trial. So this is going to be very interesting, and that is why I think October, November is going to be very, very important months for all activists around the world who need to go out and say we cannot accept these elections, whether it's in New Zealand, whether it's in Malaysia, whether it's in Thailand, or whether it's in other parts of the region or anywhere else in the world. We cannot accept these elections. I mean, how can you have an elections, for example, in Rakhine State, when 14 out of 16 districts are in the hands of the Arakan army? How can you have an elections?
Yeah, exactly.
How can you call it free and fair elections? Impossible. You might actually line up people and say, "I'll kill you if you don't shoot." I mean, if you don't vote. Maybe that's the only way of doing it, though. But that violates the very basic notions of free and fair elections. So I think this is going to raise a whole lot of issue. And if China doesn't play it right, they too are going to become victims in this process. Though. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Keith Richburg again from the Washington Post. Following up what my friend and colleague Tony was talking about, the military situation at the moment seems like a stalemate. Is there anything the Western democracies, the liberal democracies in the world should be doing, could be doing? You mentioned the Burma Act. The Burma Act calls for supplying non-lethal weapons to the resistance. Should the U.S., I get asked this question all the time from my friends in Myanmar. They're saying, you're giving all this stuff to Ukraine. Why aren't you giving anything to the resistance in Myanmar? Or is that just exploding the thing? I mean, how do I answer my friends who ask me that question?
Deep silence.
It's very hard to answer that question. I think, honestly, our government was one of many all around the world who was all in to support the Ukrainians against Putin's invasion. We gave military aid, funding, we sent people to do training, we provided military hardware. Really, other than geography and geopolitics, is there any significant difference between these two conflicts? I can't see it. So I think we're a long way from being able to have that debate publicly and politically. But I think the Western countries and everyone else who supports democracy in Myanmar should be having this conversation. What else can we do? But we're a long way from that because, not to answer your question, but the NUG goes around the world and struggles to get meetings with ministers in countries who are staunch critics of the military junta. So we're a long way from governments having that political will to take action and to do something concrete to support the democracy movement. And I contrast that with Min Aung Hlai's friends who give him a lot. They stand next to him, they invite him to events, and they give him military hardware. They take action. And the West needs to find some backbone and some heart to do the same thing for the people of Myanmar.
I do also think it comes down to coming back to our very first point that we made, to not forget about Myanmar. It's not on people's radar. There are elements of it being on some people's radar, but not to the same extent of what's happening in Ukraine, and definitely not to the same extent of what's happening in Gaza. So that's, I guess, my challenge back, is how we need to do our job as politicians, but I think other players in civil society and media need to raise up this issue and talk about it more. It needs to be talked about more. Because governments, politicians don't act unless, let's just be frank, politicians don't tend to act unless there's public pressure on them to do so. And you can't create public pressure without daylight. Like, we need some sunlight thrown all over the issue in Myanmar on a global stage. We just have to do that. And so, you know, I acknowledge those of you who are here in the room, and that is one of the reasons why we're doing this very meeting, is to push those issues up and raise them up.
I'd just like to respond just by 2 points, though. Just 1 minute, just 2 points, and very fast. I think the issue of sanctions should still be kept up alive. One on jet fuel, the other on arms, and also the political legitimacy that China gives, India gives, and Russia gives Minang Lai. I think that has to stop.
Yeah.
But jet fuel, yes. I think other countries, because it is brought by boats, by ships and so on, we can stop them. So jet fuels and arms trade can also be a way. The other one, I think, is also like countries like maybe New Zealand and others can start by saying, we will now take in students or refugees from Myanmar to our universities too. And on some kind of a special arrangement. The US could also do that, because that's already provided for in the Burma Act. Also capacity building. I know, for example, I'm sure you also had the same briefing, in some of the states, some of these ethnic states, they're building their own municipality.
That's right.
Yep. So they can learn from other ASEAN countries, including New Zealand, and therefore we can impress upon our foreign ministers and our governments to allow that to happen. So you actually have an alternative system coming in place now. Sorry, sir, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Ali Macbeth from the Global Initiative Against Transnational Organised Crime. You're talking about sort of a focus on Myanmar, and a lot of the attention, rightly, has been on the humanitarian situation in the country, but I would argue, you've mentioned it during your presentations, the security situations with the cyber scam centres, just the size and the scale of these. I think there's been a massive failure of imagination within researchers and the international community about just how big and damaging these centres are, but also the meth trade and the heroin trade, two drug trade that Myanmar is now dominating globally. So this is no longer a contained issue just for the Mekong country or Southeast Asia. This is now a global problem for national security, and countries are starting to feel this now. The issues with scams, the billions and billions. I mean, you could look at, I think we're at 6-7 billion now, if not way more, depending on what the estimates are. The countless lives destroyed of the meth trade going into Australia, New Zealand, evidence that it's now reached Africa and moving into other parts of the world. Heroin, the crackdown on the heroin trade in Afghanistan means that the Myanmar is now one of the main producers of it globally, and the damage is coming from that. So countries, I think, are going to have to find a way and of dealing with this issue. And I agree, they're in it's a catch-22. They're in, unlike Ukraine, I would argue, you do have a government you can talk to in Kyiv, and they can give arms to. You do not have that situation in Myanmar. But what you do have are ethnic groups around borderlands who are making efforts to address the drugs trade. And I will say, not all. Some are doing an amazing issue of producing meth. You just have to go up to the Wa State and Shan. But there are other EAOs who are looking to regulate. They've got drug policies. They're trying to establish education systems. But they are crying out for help. And the USAID cuts, the closing of USIP, there's less aid going in, but there's also less surveillance. There's less understanding now. We do not understand what's happening within Myanmar's borders, and this is causing a huge issue, not just from a research side, for a selfish reason, but also for countries trying to understand the security threats that are evolving and now posing to them. So I would say, if you are going back, make that case, but I think it's a massive humanitarian issue, but it's also a national security one, and one that is very quickly getting worse and worse.
So the people of New Zealand, I agree with you on everything you said, the people of New Zealand do not know, it is not common knowledge that the methamphetamine circulating throughout New Zealand is made in Myanmar. That is not known information. There'll be a handful of people who know that, but most do not. We've seen a growing, it's the worst drug in terms of the impact on communities, and it's a drug of choice in New Zealand. There's a growing usage of it, and in this year's budget there was no increase in government funding to support people using methamphetamine. So we think the people of New Zealand ought to know that methamphetamine is being made in Myanmar, and that it's allowed to happen because we have a military in place that quite frankly does not care and benefits from that. And that is a very good reason why New Zealand should be exercised on this issue. And so part of what we want to do from this visit is talk about these things. They need to be known by the public in order to get the public's interest, to put pressure on governments globally to take action.
Yeah, and that's also with the scam centres as well. I mean, I didn't know until we came on this trip about the extent of it, the extent of the exploitation that has happening, the size of the problem, the size of the warehouses, so on and so forth. So these are definitely things that we will take back to New Zealand to share with our communities, to share with our parliamentary colleagues. And I think right across the parliamentary divide, left, right, up, down, whatever, will take an interest in how this is actually directly impacting our country.
Thank you.
Yes, that's it. Oh, you one more question? Wow.
Hi, nice to meet you. Thank you very much for coming here today. My name's Harriet, and I'm here working for an NGO in Thailand. I just had a question about Thailand's role in all of this. So I appreciate that you highlighted that the recent decision to allow the 80,000 odd refugees in the permanent camps to work, which is a very important step and long overdue. I just want to say that definitely in the lead up to the sham election there is going to be a huge increase in violence and things, I'm sure, about the election protection law that was recently introduced in July.
Yeah.
But in 10 days, in the middle of September, they have charged 12 people with long-term prison sentences for criticising the election, so it's certainly going to be a massive increase, and that is likely to lead to increased displacement, and of course that means into Thailand. And I just want to highlight that Thailand has also been complicit in forcibly returning refugees or undocumented migrants back into Myanmar, and actually into the hands of the junta, particularly in the Ranong back to Koh Tong. And this is an issue that's not really discussed a lot, but Thailand is certainly aware of it, and there have been documented cases of junta officials travelling into Ranong detention facilities. In one single case, one day in July, 160 people were forcibly returned to Koh Tong, to the junta, and 150 of these were immediately conscripted into the military. So this is a huge issue and a constant cycle whereby Thailand forcibly returning people are then going into the military. So I could just asking you, what do you think New Zealand, what do you think ASEAN and ASEAN's allies, do you think they could do to pressure Thailand? As you said, it's sort of public pressure that can make most of the change. What do you think they can do to try and end this cycle? Thank you.
Thanks, Harriet. Actually, in the course of all of the meetings that we had on the border, this issue was raised with us a number of times, and people cited some of the facts that you mentioned, and said that there have been cases of undocumented migrants being pushed back over the border into the hands of the Tatmadaw, leading to many of them being forcibly conscripted into the war. So that's clearly not a good thing, and I don't think anyone in their right mind wants to see that happen. And I think that we want to be saying to the government of Thailand to respect international human rights standards, including non-refoulement, and do not push people back across the border from where they have tried to escape persecution. We wanted to try and balance that message with the bigger message, I think, which is really about, and you heard us talk earlier about the fact that of all the border states, Thailand has probably tried to manage the challenges and complexity of an armed conflict on its border kind of more and better than any of the other border states in terms of the movement of people and the transit of humanitarian assistance. And there are many parts of the Thai system, in all its wonderful complexity, where local solutions are found and a very high degree of pragmatism and flexibility is brought to bear to find local solutions. So we want to acknowledge that and call on the international community to work with Thailand to try and do more, to get more humanitarian assistance in, to give refuge to people when they are fleeing persecution. So I think that's important, but what you're raising is true as well. And I think the way that we can advance this is by countries like New Zealand and others who have a stake in this issue. We're getting alongside Thailand on this issue and seeing how we can contribute and support and share some of that burden. And respecting human rights standards must be a really important part of that. That's the best answer I can think of.
Sorry, I from APHR, just a very quick comment on that issues as a Thai citizen. So Thailand may say that they are not party to the 1951 conventions, but there's also non-refoulement clause in the Convention Against Torture, to which it's a party of, and also it has been enacted into a Thai law as well. So actually sending people back where they're at risk of being tortured or treated unhumanely, it's against the Thai law. And I think international communities can keep Thailand checked on that. It's against the Convention of Torture, what they're doing.
I guess that's it. It's about 7 o'clock, 45 minutes more than what we planned to do. But it was good. It was a good sharing moment, sharing and learning moment. Any other final thoughts, comments?
Charles, can I thank you for being with us today on the
it was a pleasure.
Should
thank ICE for that, though.
We really appreciate it. And on behalf of the delegation, can I just thank everybody for coming along tonight. If you want to pursue this conversation with us tonight or in the coming days, please feel free to come and get a card or a WhatsApp number off us. Any journalists who are here, we're happy to talk to you further if you'd like. So thank you, everybody.
So on that, let me thank all of you and also thank our guests and our friends from New Zealand. Best wishes to you. And thanks for bringing attention to an important issue of the region. And friends in front of us, thank you very much. See you soon, though.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you, Charles. I'm going to dash to the bar.
You should take a picture.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Let's do it. Yeah. We're on the legendary flight.